looks like we're live. So appreciate everybody taking the time today, and make it easier for everybody to attend being on Teams as opposed to driving downtown. So appreciate your attendance. Mike, kick us off.
All right, thank you, Steve, and thanks for everyone hopping on here this morning. Hopefully, as we move through this, I want it to be more conversational, be able to ask questions, so we can kind of dig in and see how some of these solutions can help out. Quick little agenda here. This is talking about proactive cybersecurity. And what I wanted to do with this one is start to dig into Microsoft Sentinel and see how that solution, being a SIEM and SOAR solution, can help bolster your cybersecurity operations. So starting today, we'll run through some quick introductions, kind of take a review of Zero Trust and what we've done throughout this kind of series of demonstrations. We'll dive in, talk a little bit about what Microsoft Sentinel is, run through some quick demos, and then hopefully kind of flush out some questions there at the end. So quick introductions here, who we are. So Jason, I don't think is going to be able to make it this morning, but Jason Rutherford is the co-founder and managing partner of Model Technology Solutions. My name is Mike Brimberry. I'm the director of cybersecurity here for Model. And from the Microsoft side, we have Dan Ramacati. He's the senior technical specialist in cloud and endpoint at Microsoft. So Dan, thanks for joining with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
Yes, you bet. So with Model, we are starting our 10th year in business. We focus on cybersecurity, Microsoft 365, and data center. I am a CISSP with 20 years of experience. I'm a virtual CISO for multiple organizations in various industries. I'm a cybersecurity speaker and panelist. I hold multiple cybersecurity and industry certifications such as encryption, networking, IT operations, and cybersecurity. Digging into Model a little bit further, our core values are leading with integrity and basically doing what's right for our customer, serving with compassion. So we aim to help our customers improve. Really, we just want to simply help. We want to be revolutionary. We love to innovate and find a way, either bringing information or in the technical solutions, and live life like a mullet, right? We really don't take ourselves too seriously. And then once again, our services include Microsoft 365, cybersecurity services, cloud and data center infrastructure, and service desk. Looking at Zero Trust, and those pillars for Zero Trust are verify explicitly, use least privilege access, and assume breach, right? So when we started this, we kind of started with an overview of Zero Trust. We looked at conditional access policies like MFA, privileged identity management. We looked at Intune and how Intune can manage and set configuration on managed devices. We looked at cloud apps and the policies for managed devices versus non-managed devices. We looked at identities such as dynamic groups. And we then moved in our last session with Defender. So onboarding devices, managing incidents with the Defender portal. And then here we are today looking at proactive cybersecurity and digging in with Microsoft Sentinel. Hopefully everyone has some kind of familiarity with SIEM, security incident and event management systems, or SOAR systems, so security orchestration and automated response systems. So within Microsoft Sentinel, they have these core capabilities. And over on the left-hand side is kind of that main point of having these SIEM and SOAR systems is these data connectors, right? How do we get information into these systems? How do we get the logs for all these different endpoint systems or different source systems that you may have in your environment. Being able to ingest all that data and those logs is what allows us to do the monitor and detection of what's going on with those logs. And we use certain systems and components of Sentinel like workbooks and watch list, threat intelligence, analytic rules, and how we use KQL and hunting queries and notebooks. Now, I won't go into notebooks really at all today because that would really warrant its own session just for notebooks. So I would imagine at some point in the future, I'd like to host one where we just dive strictly into notebooks. And then to round out that, once we have the data collection, we've set up analytics rules, we have threat intelligence, and by using those analytic rules, we're able to raise incidents and then be able to investigate those incidents and see if, there is malicious activity. Or on the flip side of that, automating and the remediation of those incidents with automation rules. So if you're an organization that has to adhere to certain, cybersecurity framework controls like CIS, NIST, SOC 2, or ISO 27001, this can enable you to satisfy those controls in your overall cybersecurity program, like in your logging and monitoring policies. Some examples of those are identifying attacks, storing incident information, protecting sensitive logs, or just your overall data logging and monitoring controls. Let's move on here. So when you look at the base of Microsoft Sentinel, right? So Microsoft Sentinel is a cloud native SIEM, and it sits on top of a log analytics workspace. When you have you create that log analytics workspace, we first start with the data connectors, right? How do we get information, logs, and data in there? Out of the box, Microsoft has tons of data connectors, as you can see in this list here: Azure Active Directory, Defender, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office 365, just a whole host of all of these. But when you really want to dig in and see what the capabilities are with the data connectors and what you're able to monitor, you start to look at something like this, right? You have threat intelligence vendors, your on-premises systems using CEF and syslog, Windows MMA agents, or the newer Azure Monitor agent, Defender for IoT, and then all these custom applications, all that sending data into Microsoft Sentinel so you can really get a holistic look at what you're trying to understand what's going on inside and across your enterprise. So I'll take a minute to pause there and see if anyone has any questions. I know I ran through that kind of quick.
Hey, Mike, this is Patrick.
Yes.
This is great, by the way, because I've been wondering about some of this stuff myself, particularly with on-prem logging. So it looks like everything gets put in that log analytics workspace, and I imagine that the cost is going to grow the more you put in there. Is there any? Do you have any basic information on like relative costs, I guess, in terms of do the native data connectors, do any of those, like if you have Defender for Cloud or Defender for Endpoints, et cetera, is that stuff like less expensive, I guess, using Sentinel compared to anything else, or are you not sure?
So that's a great question. So in the lab environment that I'll show, I have a syslog server collecting information from an on-premises firewall, and I'll actually be able to show you what we actually pay for that in our lab.
Okay,
and then, so you'll get to see the cost around that. And then with the native data connectors, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but the ingestion of those native data connectors are free.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
you'd want to check the time base on that. So some of that's gonna the included or the free is going to be based on a number of days, and then past that you would want to either pay for it or let the data cycle.
No, that's a
Gotcha.
great point. I forgot about the retention, Dan. So that's perfect. And we can take that offline and I can help you understand and dig up some of that information around cost if you wanted to dig into that further.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Yep. And I'm just going to add a note here to review the cost. So now I just wanted to move into the actual Sentinel interface here. Now this one is in our lab environment, so it's you know, there's a lot of hands in here. There's a lot of people doing stuff. So I'll be able to show you everything that I have in here, and you know, there's opportunities that we can work together to investigate some of these things, like what you were saying about the cost, so we could look at that and see what that looks like, and be able to investigate and, you know, kind of lab things out for you if you want to be able to learn or have access to a system that we could work together on to investigate and see if it's a fit for you. All right, so looking at this Sentinel landing page here, like I said, sits atop a log analytics workspace. So, and there's many different ways that you can have this kind of laid out or designed. So you could have, depending on how your organization is set up, you could have multiple workspaces. You could have multiple Sentinel instances sitting atop different log analytics workspaces. You could have workspaces that just grab performance data and security alerts go to a different log analytics workspace. You can use just a single workspace for Sentinel. You could have multiple, like if you have multiple divisions. There's tons of different ways that you could architect this out. So maybe if you had a subsidiary and you want the security and event management going to a log analytics workspace for them, but be able to sit atop and have a centralized Sentinel workspace that is able to see incidents at the subsidiaries. There's ways for that to happen. There's role-based access to control that. And there's other things to consider too, right? So if you have organizations that may have data sovereignty laws. So maybe you have organizations or subsidiaries in the European Union, and you need to have that data reside within that geography. We're able to work through that with those segregated workspaces. Stepping into here, the first thing that I wanted to go back and look at are those data connectors, right? So the data connectors are the kind of the kickoff point where you would want to, once you have your Sentinel workspace laid out, is being able to connect those data sources and ingest those into your Sentinel workspace. You can see here out of the box, there's over 130 different connectors, and you can see that I have 17 connected. Now, depending on what situations or technology that you have deployed throughout your organization, there's probably going to be different connectors. You can see there's Aruba, tons of Microsoft, Barracuda, Cisco Meraki. Let's see if there's anything else. Exabeam, Big IP, right? So you just have to really start to look through here. Some Juniper. Palo Alto. So tons of great things that are built right in that you can just walk through those connectors and start to pull in that information. And I'll show you what that kind of looks like here. So what I want to do now is just kind of start to sort through there. So let's say I just want to see Microsoft. Now I can see all the different Microsoft connectors. And if you look at the connectors, you can see the status, and there's this little green bar here. These show you which ones I have connected versus the ones I do not have connected. Or if I want to filter that down further, I can just show all the Microsoft ones that I have connected. So moving on from there, if I want to look, let's say I want to take a look at this Azure Active Directory one here. If I look over here to the side, I can see that I'm actually receiving data. Within 4 minutes ago, that was the last time I received logs. And with this data connector here, it comes with 9 workbooks, 2 pre-built queries, and 110 analytic rule templates. And we'll be able to go through those throughout today and investigate those. And some of these data connectors, and I'll show you what they look like here in a minute. So there's dependencies on the licensing that you would have with Microsoft, like E3 or E5 or Azure P1 or P2, or on-prem versus cloud native, different connectors. But in these data types here, if we see these green ones here, these show a connected icon. That means that the sign-in logs or the audit logs, those are actual data tables that we'll look at in a little bit. Those are actually being ingested into Sentinel. Having that data being ingested allows me to write those KQL queries that are the basis for analytic rules that create incidents when some type of anomaly or suspected malicious activity is detected, versus the ones that I don't have. So, for instance, Azure AD risky users. So right now in this lab, I only have Azure AD P1. If I had Azure AD P2, I would have the ability to run those risky user conditional access policies like we looked at in that first zero trust session. And I'd be able to create alerts or raise incidents or have some type of automation take effect on, potential risky users. So hope that makes sense, right? So data connectors, receiving logs, the different data types that are being ingested versus the ones that are not. Pause there, see if anybody has any questions yet. All right. So let me open a connector page. So when you come into the connector page, right, it's going to populate these prerequisites. Do you have the permissions? Do you have the right permissions to read and write permissions to those diagnostic settings? Do I have the right roles assigned to me? And then when you're in the configuration, you can start to select which ones that you get to see. Now, even though I have risky users and user risk events selected, I'm not going to be able to get those because I don't have the right Azure AD P2 license to get those. And you can see here. There we go. So looking at another data connector, Microsoft 365 for Defender, what I want to have happen is, if you remember from our last session, right, we had certain incidents coming in here. And now, instead of having like 2 different interfaces, one being the security portal here, where I get Defender or Defender for Office 365 incidents, I want to be able to just ship all those over to Sentinel, so I don't really have 2 places to monitor for incidents. So on my security page here on the home screen, if I scroll down, You have the Azure Sentinel integration, and you can see here my integration is enabled. And that's all facilitated through these data connectors. And then once again, just dependent upon the licensing that you have set up is going to determine which different events that you can pull in. So you can see from my Defender for Endpoint, I can get device events, device network events, network info. And really what these are going to play into is those data tables. And we'll be able to look at those using KQL here in a little bit. So really just wanted to push home looking at those ways that we can get information into Sentinel using these data connectors. And then while I'm out here, we had that question earlier about cost. And currently the most expensive ingestion I have is from that syslog. And the way I did that is I have this legacy agent here dumping into security events. And right now what I'm doing is I'm pulling in common events, and this is a non-Azure machine. And we had to set up an agent on a Linux box to be able to export that syslog from our firewall, pump it to that syslog server, and then using the Windows legacy agent, pump those up into Sentinel through this data connector. And we'll investigate that a little bit more here in just a minute. All right, so does anyone have any questions on data connectors? Any comments?
What you just described about syslog, might be interested in learning more about at some point. I saw that there was a native connector called like Microsoft Syslog, I thought, or Azure Syslog, but I didn't know what the difference was. I don't want to get us off track for what you've got planned. So if you could point me in the right direction later.
You bet. Sorry, what was your
Great.
name again?
Patrick, sorry, Swackhammer.
Patrick. Yeah, we can, I'll make a note to get something set up with you so we can take that one offline.
Okay.
I'll show you all the dirty bits in the background that we did to get that working, and some of the intricacies of using a Azure management agent versus a legacy agent versus trying to shove syslog in through, you know, there's a bunch of different ways that you can ingest this data. All these different features in here, and I'm going to use an example of let me perfect. I want to make sure I had it set up in here before I started to talk about it. So, you know, from time to time, clients come up and they need very specific use cases for information that they're trying to pull out from all these different logs using KQL. And we had one scenario here where of everything that I've found so far, if you're a member of an AD group, or let's say you're in a very specific OU on premises in Active Directory, I had no way that I found yet to be able to surface that through any of the native data connectors that are coming in. Well, this client, they wanted to be able to filter out anyone that's in this specific OU because they were of a certain user type, and they wanted to find all users that were accessing their organization from non-managed or non-compliant devices. So if they had a personal iPhone or personal Android or a personal Mac or Windows device, right? They wanted to be able to identify these people so they could start, laying in policies that say, hey, we're moving away from you being able to use your personal devices, and you have to use a corporate device. Well, there's a bunch of different ways that we went about this, but within Sentinel, they have these things called the watch list, and there's many different ways that you can use a watch list. But one of the things that I found is that a watch list is like another storage area that you can use to store information. In this case, everyone that's in that specific OU that I wasn't able to surface through a regular KQL query. Well, once I put them into a watch list, then I can use a KQL query and reference that watch list within that KQL query. I know that's kind of convoluted, but I'll show you what I mean. So anyway, we created a watch list and we just called it, exclude users. So within this watch list called exclude users, we just said, here's those two people, right? And you can see that we're running just a simple quick KQL query where we're referencing the get watch list command, and then the watch list name is exclude users. So now that I can run another KQL query, reference that watch list, so now I'm automatically going to be able to exclude all those users from that specific OU, while going after all those users that would be logging in from a non-corporate device. That was a long way to say kind of what a watch list is and how we ended up using it. Are there any questions about watch lists? Just think of watch list as another custom storage location for potential custom data that you can use in KQL queries. There are a bunch of kind of templates, right? Maybe there's high value assets. These are just built in. Identity correlation network addresses, terminated employees, VIP users. And what you can start to use these for is as you start to build out your analytic rules, maybe there's analytic rules that you don't want everything in your organization being alerted on. Maybe you just want anything within that high value assets list to be alerted on, right? So maybe you have a bunch of test and dev machines that you really don't care about, or they're constantly sending up false positives and you want to be able to filter those out, add everything into the high value assets, and those are the ones that you really focus on, right? Attach those analytic rules basically to that watch list and say, these are the ones that I really care about. And there's just a little bit easier way to manage some of that data. One of the data connectors also involves threat intelligence, and being able to bring in threat intelligence is probably one of the top reasons of data connectors is being able to get updated information as quick as you can about potential indicators of compromise, right? So out in the world, there's all these different security organizations, security research firms that are doing the research, finding, that potential IP addresses are hosting malware, or they are potential command and control systems, things of that nature. So being able to get that data into your system in some type of automated fashion. So if one of your users or machines or servers are seen communicating with a particular IP address, and having those analytic rules alert you to the fact that, hey, 10 of your servers have just started communicating with this one known malware hosting website or IP address is pretty critical. So threat intelligence is one of those data connectors, and Microsoft has made it quite easy recently. The addition of, I believe it was this one. So previously you had to source your threat intelligence in various ways. So recently, Microsoft added the Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence preview here, where they're automatically going to take some of the signals that they are getting from the Microsoft Threat Research Center and ingest that right into your Sentinel just by clicking and hooking up this data connector. Previously in the past, what you'd have to do is have like a taxi server, and you'd have to have some different threat intelligence platforms. And we have some of those set up, but basically those taxi servers, what they do is you would source that information from different public sources or paid sources out on the internet, you know, like, Stellarium was one, there's literally hundreds of them, but you'd have to be able to pull those in, have a custom threat intelligence enterprise application that is able to receive those, or have a custom logic app that would go out to like Alien Vault and source those and bring those indicators of compromise in. I'll show you what those little sources look like here. So going over to threat intelligence, anomaly, which they've since ceased giving out free ones. So you have Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence, Pickup Sticks, Security Graph, Stellarium is one. And then you can sort and see where these are coming from. So like, this one came from, this URL is a Alien Vault injection, which is a custom logic app that we had to use to be able to pull in those. So you can see here that there's different kind of indicators. It could be a file hash. It could be URLs. It could be IP addresses, all sorts of things. So then what's going to happen is after you have your threat intelligence imported through data connectors, and here shortly we'll look at those analytic rules, whenever you have clients that communicate or find those file hashes potentially before they would even be added to a signature file, you'd be able to alert and identify and take action on those potentially malicious connections or files or that you might find on your endpoints. The analytic rules, you're going to see what you have are active rules. You can see I have 33 active rules. You're going to have rule templates. Now, some of these might have different rule types, like a run on a schedule or NRT, near real time. There's some in here that are going to be labeled as fusion. There's a few different types, and they also have these anomalies, right? And these anomalies, the user, entity, and behavior and analytics, right? So these are going to be usually enabled by default. They're also going to be mapped to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and of what different attack threat vectors they're trying to use. So like defense, evasion, execution, persistence, command and control, initial access, things of that nature. These should be enabled by default. But when you start to get in here and you start to look at these rules or these rule templates, you really want to understand what they're doing, why it's important to your organization, and then start to enable these rules to understand what they're doing and how they're going to impact your organization, because you don't want to overwhelm whoever's actually managing and responding to these incidents, because turning on one rule, it could throw in hundreds or thousands of different incidents, and then having to manually weed through those could potentially have you miss something that's actually actionable, right? So tuning these rules and understanding what they're doing and why it's important to your organization is critical. And all these rules are, let's look at this one. This one's a good demo one. So here's a very simple one that was built off one of these rule templates. So let me edit this. So looking at this one, this query looks for accounts being created where the name does not match a defined pattern. So in your organization, potentially you say all accounts have to meet this certain naming criteria, right? So if you had a malicious actor that was trying to create accounts, if they didn't know your exact pattern, right, that could be an indicator of someone trying to create an account. And maybe if it doesn't, you know, who's really looking at all the new accounts, right? So this one's kind of, I think, clever way to do that. But you'd really have to have a organizational standard that says this is how the naming pattern of the accounts would look. Now in this one, I just did a simple regex expression here. So everything would have to be UEM dot whatever. So anything that would be created without a UEM dot whatever would trigger an alert. And these are part of those KQL queries, right? You can see here that the audit logs is where the source information of this is coming from. So someone tried to add a user, it was successful, and then we parse through all that and see if the added user matches our regex expression. And if not, then create an incident, and then we have to follow up on it. Pause there. I know I'm going kind of quick. Any questions? All right, let me look at another one real quick here. So, anyway, malicious inbox rule. And really, whenever you start to understand these and look through them, you can see what type of impact it would have to your organization, right? So when you think of account compromise or business email compromise, some of these different tactics that they would use, I've heard from organizations that they would get access to an email account, and then they would start creating all these inbox rules to obfuscate the communication that they would be sending in and out, right? So they get access to a mailbox, they're communicating with either, you know, someone in the accounts payable department or another organization that's going to send payment, where they're actually using that user's email box, but having those inbox rules filter that information to a different storage location, different folder, and being able to send them information that says, yes, I know this was the bank account information. Now I want you to send it to this bank account information. So being able to detect different things within those email accounts or those inbox rules and seeing what's really happening where users may not be aware of is a critical way to find, you know, potential fraud within the organization. So going back with this KQL, we can see here that it's looking at this office activity custom log, and it's looking at these different keywords like help desk, alert, suspicious, fake, malicious, all these different things. And then what it's doing is it has the deleted items or junk email, and then scroll through here. So it's going to count them up. So the subject contains those keywords, body contains those keywords, or the subject or body contains those keywords. And then based off of that, we'll create an incident. And we can take a look at those here in our incidents. All right, so here's one. So this is a incident here. What we want to do is there's multiple different ways, but things are labeled by severity, right? So maybe we have some type of priority, right? We highlight the highs, mediums, then lows, something like that. But for this demo's sake, if we want to look at the medium incidents, we have one here. What I first want to do, status, it's active. I'm going to take ownership of this. I want to see the full details here. So when we start to look at this, it's going to start to tell us the story here. So this user on this host at this address, right? These are the entities. This is the user. So this is where we'd start our investigation here of what was happening with that user. They have something going on with their inboxes. So the rule is detecting on delete of traces of phishing email from user mailboxes, right? So there's something going on with this user. We want to start the investigation here and figure out what's going on with that. So having knowledge or incidents raising alerts against these different inbox rules, I think is pretty cool. If we start to look at incidents, right? So we understand that analytic rules are raising these incidents. Now we want to be able to see if an incident comes in, what type of automation can we take against that so we don't have so much manual work out here. So if we want to look at automation here, so I created this one here, but we can walk through another one so you can kind of see the process. Creating an automation rule, just name this one Sentinel demo. So when an incident created, when an incident is updated, or when an alert is created. In this scenario, I want to do when an incident is created. So you can have the incident provider, you can have the analytic rule. So only if it's raised by a certain analytic rule that we have, such as that user account creating using the incorrect naming format. I have a demo for that one, so we won't use that one here. What I want to do is say maybe when the incident title equals Sentinel demo, no, I don't want to do that. Title equals Sentinel demo. And the actions I want to do, I want to change the status to active. And I want to change the owner, me. And I want to change the severity to high. Description equals. Let's see if I got that right. Oh. Let's have two. description. Sentinel demo. No, I don't want that one. Save. So quick automation rule, what's going to happen is that whenever a incident comes in that's named Sentinel demo, it's going to change the status, change the owner, and change the severity. So let me create an incident. Title Sentinel demo. Medium, new, create. And we'll give that a minute to work through. And then hopefully my demo works. So by using that automation rule, whenever, it has to fit whatever criteria, and that's where you kind of have to get creative with inside your organization of how you want it to be, right? So it's assigned it to me, set it to active, and change the severity to high. We could very well have it go do a multiple of other options, right? So looking at those automation rules here, so that's where these playbooks start to come in. All these playbooks here are related to logic apps. So one here is block Azure AD user. Let me go look at this one real quick. So looking at that, let me switch back here and show you the analytics rule one more time. So whenever a user is created that doesn't match our rule naming convention, UEM dot whatever, it's going to raise an incident. So if we go look at our incidents here, we can see that we have a user account was created. So if I want to look at the full details of this one, I can take ownership of this one, active, and assign it to me. And I can see that this user, wrong user at model UEM lab was created. So if I look over here, refresh, wrong user, count status is enabled. So as a SOC analyst, if I'm in here, if I want to be able to run some automation on here, we have that playbook set up where I want to block Azure AD user. So basically what that logic app is going to do is going to pull this user ID information out of this incident, and it's going to go and disable that user. And let's see if it's a second to run. And this automatically goes and sets that account status to disabled. So that's just like one example, and you really got to start to think about how and what type of automation you'd want in your organization, right? So if you wanted to have a incident responder right up at front, you can start to look at what are those steps that you would want a user or an analyst to do. Do we just want to isolate the device because we have those capabilities kind of built into those different pieces of automation? So we can run antivirus, isolate the machine. We can enrich information about the IP address. We can get virus total information. And then there's just tons of different playbooks that are already built in and other custom ones that are out there from people in the community to enrich or take action on. And you can start to look through here and see, you know, we were looking at that risky user, right? So we can confirm that that Azure AD user is risky, right? We can create tickets, update tickets. We can dismiss Azure AD risky user. And, you know, not just within the Microsoft, right? Carbon Black, CrowdStrike, post message in the Teams, right? There's just tons and tons of automation. And that's really where the power starts to come in to this, is being able to do more with less, right? So if we have all these different playbooks across those different analytic rules for those activities, we can, as soon as an incident would come in, right? So we could say, well, this user was disabled, or this user account was created. Maybe we don't even want the analyst to come in here and then have to click incident actions and run that run book. Maybe we want to set a automation rule that would say, oops, automation. Like here, block Azure AD users. So when the incident is created, right, and the analytic rule is the user account using the incorrect naming format, and we set the severity to high, it's automatically going to run that block Azure AD user. So we don't have to run that. We could either, if it just comes in from this analytic rule, or once we set it to high, or if it just comes in like that, it just runs it automatically. Workbooks, this is really how you start to visualize some of that data, right? So looking at those KQL queries, and I'll kind of show you what that means here in just a second. So once again, tons of templates out here, all across all different types of information. So I have just a few demo ones here. With a couple of different visualizations. So here's a quick demo. I wanted to see what location or where my users are logging in from. So obviously, most of the ones that we have are right around here in the Midwest. And I can see how many per user. And then we've got one straggler over here. It looks like some kind of managed service account. So maybe this is interesting, and we want to be able to look at that user ID or user account or GUID or service ID and see what that is and why it's being geolocated out here in the middle of nowhere. And we can see here what location. And here's that one. It's got a sign-in activity and error 574. So this is something that I'd want to go and start to investigate and see what this user is and what this means. Another demo workbook here, right? We can start to look at all the different ways that we can look at information. And everything in the background of these are those KQL queries based off of those tables that we have from those data connectors. I'll kind of show you how that ties together here in just a second. So you've got text, grids, and tiles. So charts and graphs. Time brushing, right? I only want to look at this section. So lots of different ways that you can visualize data in these workbooks. Some other ones, if you use attack surface reduction, so block all Office applications from creating child process. So this is a more of a custom one. So in the lab, we have a unified device. So we have Unify pointed to a syslog server, which is just a Linux box that runs the Azure Monitor agent, collects that data, sends it up, and then this is the workbook that's going to show us the different types of activity that's going on with that firewall. Top MAC addresses, destinations, sources, top domains that they're going to. So here's the different user activities, and what does this all mean? If I go to edit and I want to see what's actually behind here, as this is looking at those different pieces of information from those log tables. And this is how everything really is generated. So if you want to have a workbook, right, you've got to write those KQL queries. Well, most of these are you can get from templates, and there's plenty of other resources out on the internet to help write these KQL queries. Analytic rules, workbooks, all those incidents, everything really starts with those data connectors and being able to ingest that information into these tables. And you can get right at those through the logs. Also those watch lists, because then they get kind of turned into logs. So let's look at a custom log, right? So we have that that Ubiquity firewall. And I don't know what's in here, right? So if I'm looking at the logs, I've got all these tables and these custom logs. I can see that it's Ubiquity_CL for custom log. And it has these columns in there, but I don't really know what's in there. So when I start to look at KQL and start to understand what is in here, I just simply write the name of the table up there. I give it let's give it a shorter time frame so we're not just flooding the system with, because you can see that there's already 30,000 results within the last 30 minutes. And here's everything that's in here: time generated, message, and type. Well, that doesn't really tell us too much here. We can expand this out and see kind of what's in here a little bit more, but it looks like it's all managed within this kind of message thing here. So let's look and see if we can dig in here a little bit. So where message dot Mac equals. Let's see if this works. No, it doesn't like that. Spelling that wrong. Mac. That one more time. To string. I'd have to convert that to string. It's okay. Let me give you a different one here. Logs. Audit logs, that was one from, so audit logs, last 30 minutes. Okay. So now we can see this one updated that user, which our user is probably going to be that wrong user from that automation piece we ran. Yep. Target resources equals wrong user. All right, so that was a long kind of convoluted way to get around to show you that the KQL logs, so specifically looking at this one, audit logs, looking at where operation name contains disable. So I just wanted to see that one record. So maybe I don't know what I'm looking for. So I want to find what have I done in the last 30 minutes. All right. So search, quote, whatever the string is, in my case, my last name, quote. And I can see here that within the security incident table, what did I do? Sentinel demo, created something there. Here's some kind of Azure AD sign in. I'd like to be able to find something about the device that I'm logging in from. I can see where I'm logging in from. All right, so maybe not the best example, but within the last 30 minutes, someone where the user principal name contains Brimberry has logged in 13 times. So using this and building those KQL queries off of these tables is really kind of that foundation within Sentinel, right? So if I go back to Sentinel here, yes, I know. Okay. Looking back at those data connectors, right? This was the one that we were just looking at, Azure AD non-interactive user sign-in logs. So that one is connected. I can query those because we have that data connector connected and ingesting those logs. From the analytic rules, right, we were able to look at this one, for instance. Again, looking at that rule logic is using KQL. And it's not like you have to know how to write all these. A lot of these are built in, and you can start to look and understand what is in where. And we can, even if we don't know what the table is, we can always go to the logs and just click search. But for instance, this one is using the audit logs table, which is coming from one of those data connectors. And then those analytic rules are the ones that create those different or raise those different incidents. The workbooks that we have are all built around KQL queries. So if I look at this map one, go in here and edit, and I look at this one. This one is using the sign-in logs, and we're extending latitude and longitude, and we're going in and parsing that JSON to a string to get the location details, geo coordinates, latitude and longitude, and we're projecting, which is kind of just if you use a regular SQL, right? I don't remember what the exact SQL query language is, but project is just returning these columns and summarizing that at the bottom, right? So, and then we're projecting that visualization onto a map where we have those map settings, and then tying those latitude underscore longitude on that map. And there's tons of different ways that you can kind of lay this out. You can make it smaller, larger. You can have the different counts at the bottom here. Let me get out of that. But anyway, that those KQL, having those logs, being able to ingest those is what's going to allow you to pull in that data, monitor, detect, and then finally, after that, look at the automation piece behind that to see how we can take care of those incidents, either manual hands-on looking at those, or being able to create logic apps or regular automation rules to do so. Pause there and see if anybody has any questions. It seems like I ran through all this really, really quick. There was one lost. And that was Patrick. You were wanting to look at the cost of this?
He said he had to drop. So I'm looking forward to watching the video.
Gotcha. Well, Patrick, this is for you. So this is a built-in Microsoft Sentinel workbook. This is a average cost for this over the last 90 days. It was $250. So divided by 3. And the biggest cost by far is that custom log that we're pulling in from that Ubiquity firewall. All right, Steve, I ran through this really, really quick.
Yeah, other questions or anything anybody wants Mike to dig down on or go a little bit deeper with? Perfect. Mike, did you have anything else you wanted to cover?
Hopefully I didn't bore everyone to death, and hopefully this has given some folks something to think about. And if you want to dive into this further and do any kind of custom work in our lab, very, very happy to get in here and look at some of the custom solutions that you may be looking for, or challenges or roadblocks that you would have to be able to get into a more proactive cybersecurity stance with some of these tools.
And Mike, do you mind if I share real quick? I just wanted to give everybody a quick preview on something. If you have, if you've deployed Intune, wanted to make you aware that we've got a new product coming out. It's a new Power BI dashboard that links Intune, Defender for Endpoint, Azure AD, Log Analytics, Power BI, Synapse Analytics, and Serverless SQL. Designed to reduce a lot of hours and clicks, because if you're using Intune, you know that the reporting may not be as functional as you would like. And with our managed services clients, we have developed this dashboard that we're looking for beta customers to give it a try. So if you're interested, let me know. It covers all of the different devices by type down to the specific machine level, and we'll show Azure AD connection by type, all of your cloud service issues. If you have, it will show if there's any issues that are currently being remediated or what the history has been. To get to devices, mobile devices, missing critical updates and missing high updates takes a lot of clicks. So we've bubbled that all up into one interface. Even involves Defender for Endpoint. So total devices managed by Defender and Endpoint, and with the specific details by device. And we're even doing custom, able to pull custom inventory, like software app inventory that may not register in add remove programs. hardware components that may not be in standard inventory for warranty purposes, custom registry entries, custom views for software patches. So if some reporting like this is of interest, let me know, and I'd be happy to put you on a beta trial list to get trusted customer feedback. I appreciate you attending today. We've got one more event coming up, and if you have any other suggestions on content or things that you'd like Mike to cover, please let me know. It looks like Matthew's typing, and
And
yes,
Jonathan has a question in there.
Yes, it does use graph and log analytics. And all we would need to try it is I've got a list of items that we would need, like a secret key and stuff, and the application ID from your Azure tenant, and we can hook it up.
And Steve, Matthew
go ahead,
has a
Mike.
question about
Yes.
the device compliance. Does this show compliance? I thought it
Yes.
did.
Yes, it shows what devices aren't compliant and why they're not compliant. This is just a screen capture of the actual report, so I'm not able to demo it right now. Other questions? Appreciate your time. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Mike.
thank you all for your attention, and I appreciate any feedback that you'd have. Thank you very much.
I will be sending out a link to the recording. There was somebody had a question or comment? Perhaps not. All right, I'll send a link to the recording once it processes, and hope you all have a great week, and thanks for your attendance.